There is a downside as well, and here I want to quote from a well-known American sociologist, Robert Putnam, and he has a couple of publications on this. This particular one is a book called Bowling with Our Own. Ethnic diversity, he says, is increasing in most advanced countries, driven mostly by sharp increases in immigration. In the long run, immigration and diversity are likely to have important cultural, economic, fiscal and developmental benefits. In other words, immigration in general is good for all societies. In the short run, however, immigration and ethnic diversity tend to reduce social solidarity and social capital. New evidence from the US suggests that in ethnically diverse neighbourhoods, residents of all races tend to hunker down. They tend, in other words, to retreat into themselves, to become more inward-looking, to become a bit more suspicious of other people. Trust, even of one's own race, and I personally disagree with the word race, but however, trust is lower, altruism and community cooperation rarer, friends fewer. In the long run, however, successful immigrant societies have overcome such fragmentation by creating new cross-cutting forms of social solidarity and more encompassing identities. Now, I think there's a lesson there, because what he's saying is that, yes, in the initial phase, it is challenging. We're dealing with difference, and it's something which maybe in our case, for instance, in Ireland, we haven't been so accustomed to. And that's something that poses a challenge to us and which may, in the short term, lead to a diminution in social trust. We're less likely to trust our neighbours. We're less likely to share that sort of neighbourly feeling of solidarity, friendship and support than might be the case if we were all of the same homogenous ethnic identity. And incidentally, you don't have to look any further than South Dublin at the moment, because we've had that distressing event. First of all, the tragedy of the 10 people who died in a traveller camping site or settlement site some days back, and then the response of their neighbours, or some of their neighbours anyway, in refusing to have them rehoused in the immediate locality. So in a sense, this illustrates perfectly what Putnam is saying. But we cannot accept this as a norm. No society has a right to say, you may live here, but you may not. And in that case, I think there's a lesson to be learned from our treatment of travellers, which we need also to apply to migrants and others more generally. So it poses a few questions. Does it matter if migrants and their families cluster together, for instance? And this is something which is often mentioned in the context of migrants in all societies. And here in Cork, you have it already. You've got, say, the area of Blackpool, where there's a large number of Roma, for instance. There are a large number of Nigerians and West Africans living. Is that a problem or is it not? I would simply say that rather than seeing it as the ghettoisation of people, we need to also recognise that all new communities in any society tend to look to each other in the first place for neighbourly and moral support. Over time, they become more integrated, and then they move out and they disperse and they make new networks of friendship and so forth. And I don't see absolutely anything wrong with that. And I think it's probably mistaken to see this as a process of invidious ghettoisation. We should see it as part of a cycle or a set of steps which migrants engage in, just as the Irish did themselves. So you still have places in America, for instance, like South Boston, which contains a largely Irish neighbourhood, but the great majority of Irish people who go to the States now have moved on, moved out, and live in very mixed communities. So I don't think that's something to worry about. And I'm quoting here a former Minister for Integration, and in fact the only one we've had. There is a minister now who has a nominal responsibility, but it's not his prime responsibility. And he says, if we're to take integration seriously, people who come here must understand our way of doing things. When the President and ministers travel to the Middle East, they accept cultural requirements of the country and the culture they're operating in. It's a vice versa situation. Please disregard the bad grammar there with regard to Ireland. I disagree passionately with this point of view. Why should we compare an advanced democratic country and its standards with, in this particular case, and it's Saudi Arabia is the reference, a fascist theocracy? And I would say that Saudi Arabia is at the back of many of the problems at the moment that are occurring in Syria and Iraq because of their backing for IS. And there's little doubt about that. So in other words, this is not the standard we should follow. We should not follow the standard of saying, you're here, so you need to behave like us. We do need to behave sensitively to each other, whether it's about the wearing of the hijab or it's about something like the place of the Roman Catholic Church in Irish society. But we do not, in fact, need to behave in the same way as people in Saudi Arabia behave, where the practice of a different religion is regarded as a potential crime. Let's look at the responsibility of governments, and let's say, what have Irish governments over the years said about this whole question of integration? The first definition we can come across is from 1999, and it was a document published about refugees, and the definition is here. Integration means the ability to participate to the extent that a person needs and wishes in all of the major components of society without having to relinquish his or her own cultural identity. It's not a bad start. Fair enough. It recognises that people have different cultural backgrounds, they're coming from different places, but they should have the right to preserve their own cultural identity while at the same time having the right to participate fully in society around us. There is, however, a problem. It doesn't recognise that the government itself has any role, any more interventionist role in providing the means by which this laudable aim can take place. That's 1999. We have Bertie Ahern some years later saying it was important that people who come to our country have to assimilate into our own culture and our own norms in society. I think that rather than sectionalise people within organisations, it's far better that they would form part of that system. What he's really saying there is that if you're here and if you come here from somewhere else, you want to become Irish, well then you have to leave your own identity at the door. That's something which, for instance, France has practiced for a very long time, as opposed to countries like the Netherlands or Britain to some extent, or Canada, where there's a recognition that people have different identities, and in order to feel fully part of society, they need to have the right to preserve those identities, and not simply to jettison everything that they came with and, as it were, assimilate into the majority identity within the new society. And then finally, shouldn't they learn our rules if they want to live here? And this tends to be one of the things that concerns most people. All I can say is that when we have a different society composed of different elements, we need to recognise that that society is one where everybody participates, everyone makes decisions. It's not the one, maybe, that I was born into. So what? We have a new place now. We have a more diverse, interesting, exciting and mixed population that has enormous potential. It is by and large a very positive rather than negative thing, and that's the way in which we should see it.